And we're live. Welcome to the FeedBak podcast, everybody. My name is Bag. Got Miko in the house.
Hello, world.
And we're live here at Native Hostel. Thank you so much to the staff for letting us host our podcast here. It's been about a month, and I'm really excited. I'm really excited about this show. But before I introduce our special guest, this show is brought to you by Austinite. If you want to take your significant other out on a date, or your family's in town, you don't know what to do, you know what's going on, and you don't have to do anything. So Austinite pairs live music events with dinner at a restaurant and transportation. So just like you book a flight or book a hotel room, you book a night out. So if you have no plans for date night, you're like, I don't know what to do, I don't want to do any research, Austinite.com. Check out all the events we got. We got all the events from Antone's, Cedar Street, Empire Control Room, and as far as restaurants, Peiche, Russian House, and Wu Chow. So you pick the show, then pick the restaurant pairing, add transportation if you want, and then you're ready to go. Car comes to pick you up at home, and you're out on a good night. Use promo code FDBK for 20% off, and that's it. Austinite, your nightlife delivered. All right, I am so pumped about this show. We have Bob Duke, Dr. Bob Duke in the house. I got to say doctor. Because I was looking at the title, and it's like Marlene and Morton Mayerson Centennial.
That's all right. That's all right. My
Nice
mother would like to say that, but it doesn't.
Can I
okay,
just say Bob?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob. Yeah.
We got
That's good.
Bob Duke and Art Markman. Thank you so much for coming.
It's good to be here.
From Two Guys in the Head, fellow podcasters.
Yeah.
So it's good. Now, it's good to have people who know how to actually hold the mic. 'Cause sometimes we have people talking like this. It's
I don't know who those people are.
Man, Nico. This is what I miss. Anyway, welcome to the audience. We have a really good audience. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it on a hot Sunday afternoon. So we're going to be talking about the psychology of nightlife. As you know, the FeedBak podcast is about the nightlife experience. It's our conversation about different perspectives on nightlife. So we try to, bring some topics to light, get some stories out there from the folks who made nightlife what it is. But, as a nightlife fan myself, as a downtown rat, if you will, for a decade.
A member and the president.
Yeah. I've always wondered, what is it about nightlife that's so compelling to people that makes them want to partake into this experience, and who better to ask than psychology professors? So I wanted to get your take on it, but before we do, I want to tell me a little bit how you guys got into this psychology. What was it about psychology that went tilting your head? You're like, that's it, this is what I want to do. Art?
Yeah, so for me, I went to college, didn't know what I wanted to do. I took some economics because I thought that might be cool, and I didn't like it. Then I took some physics, and it didn't like me. And kind of drifted into a combination when I was in college of computer science and psychology.
Interesting.
And at the time, computers were slow and stupid. So I went the psychology route, and it's worked out all right.
And never look back.
Never look back.
Exactly
Never look
right.
back.
What are you, Bob?
I've always been curious about people, but actually I started my career as a music teacher in a school, and I found learning interesting, and I've been a student of learning all my life, and the older I got and the more degrees I collected, I started studying more things about how human beings learn and what leads us to behave the way we do, and I didn't look back either.
And that's
there
right.
you go.
We have to bring him back on his music teaching side.
Yeah. So what about the podcast? So Two Guys on the Head. How did that come about? How did that?
So the quick version of the story, I run a program at the University of Texas called the Human Dimensions of Organizations, and when it first started, we were trying to find some ways to let more people know about it, and so one of the things we did was call KUT and say, listen, you have this show called Views and Brews at the Cactus Cafe. Could we come and talk about something that would be related to this program that we have that teaches people in business about people? And they said, sure. And so I thought, well, it's a music venue. I should find somebody who seems related. So I called Bob, since he's in the music school. And we went and talked about how to think effectively. And we had a great time. And they called us back a year later to do another one. And when we got there, Rebecca McEnroy, who produces Views and Brews, said, listen, I talked to the people at the station. Do you guys want a show? And we looked at each other, and she said, well, think car talk, but for the mind. And we went, oh, yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Done.
Done.
And we can do that.
Yeah. The next thing we knew, we had microphones in our face.
Yeah, exactly.
How long ago was that?
About 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
5 years. How many episodes today?
Pardon me?
How many episodes today?
I'm
Yeah,
180, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to see more podcasts, coming up in Austin.
Yeah.
Like I started this 4 years ago. There wasn't that many. I can't say I'm a pioneer or anything, but now it's like, shut up. But now, I mean, it's great to see more podcasts in Austin about anything and everything. I think it's a great platform to have conversations.
Absolutely.
You control your own content. I'm not going to make the whole.
It was very fortuitous for us because we don't know what we're doing, and Rebecca, who knows a lot about podcasting and is quite an entrepreneur when it comes to that sort of thing, knew how to set this up to make it go. So we're very fortunate to be working with her.
Well, thank you for being here. I really
It's
appreciate
our pleasure.
it.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, first broad question, like, what is it about going out that's so enticing? I'm just going to start there, and we're going to dive a little deeper.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. So I think the first thing is that we are a social species, and so if you think about watching a comedy movie, for example, comedies are much funnier with a group than alone. I mean, before we started, you were talking about a movie, a comedy movie that was playing in which people were quoting along and singing. That is unlikely to happen when you're alone in your own home. It's just you actually feel, oddly enough, more self-conscious and less enthusiastic about doing that sort of thing all alone. But in a social group in which everyone's doing this, things are funnier, things are more exciting, music is better, and so we really do take advantage of all those areas of the brain that are really designed to get us engaged socially.
And I think we're very attuned to the people around us, right? So if other people are enjoying things and we're in their presence, we're more likely to enjoy them as well.
Contagious.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah, right. So I mean, there is that aspect of being a human being and responding to the people around you. It's interesting when VHS videos came out and you could buy a movie or rent a movie and go watch it at home. Everybody predicted the demise of movie theaters because who would go out if you could watch the movie at home?
Right.
And of course, movie theaters are packed, and they're not packed just because the sound's better and the screen's bigger. That's maybe part of it. But the big thing is you're watching it with a bunch of other people, and even though you don't know them,
Right.
just the fact that you sense that other people in the room with you are reacting and responding to the same things that you're responding to makes it a richer experience for any individual in the room.
But what is it about specifically the nighttime, where that during the day we're all straight laced, we go to work, we dress nice, we look nice, we're all proper, and then sun goes down, and then that's it. We just let loose, we go crazy. That's where crime happens. That's when stupid things happen. Anything past midnight. I mean, what is it about the nighttime that we really loved, to be a part of?
Yeah. Well, no.
Oh, I was going to say so.
I love this.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I got this.
It's an hour of that. So, one of the things about the nighttime is you don't have any responsibilities after that. So when you get up in the morning, right? If you start your morning with a Bloody Mary, right? Nothing else of substance is going to happen the rest of the day, whether you wanted to or not. But by the time the evening comes, right, you really do have this opportunity to say, okay, I've done all the productive stuff I'm going to do today, and now it's my time to relax and enjoy. And so there's a variety of things happening. So part of it is a social contract that we have with everybody that we're gonna do what we're gonna do during the day, and then we're gonna enjoy at night. And so that's a piece of it. But also, by the time the evening comes, you're a little bit tired, which reduces some of your inhibitions, right? So if you think about, why wouldn't you necessarily want to dance in front of a bunch of people or sing in front of a bunch of people? Well, part of it is we've got these frontal lobes in our brain, and part of the function of them is to do a lot of reasoning, but another part is to stop you from doing dumb things. And so what we do at night is a variety of things to try and impair that system that's going to calm you down. Some of which is just you're a little bit more tired, right? And you've had a whole day of kind of controlling your behavior, so your brain doesn't particularly want to control yourself anymore. And then we help it along, you know, with a beer or something like that also dampens the function of those frontal lobes. And so now you put yourself in an environment in which you're actually going to do some of the things that you might have been self-conscious about before.
Yeah, and I think another component of this that's really an important piece of it is the ability for choice making. You know, when most of us are doing things we're doing during the day, as I was saying, we have responsibilities, and what those responsibilities lead to is other people or circumstances deciding what we need to do, right? So there's things that have to get done, maybe even on a schedule, and or we have bosses that are telling us what things are supposed to be done. So not a lot of choice making that happens, right? But when work is over, just the fact that, and work usually ends for most people at the end of a day and at the beginning of an evening, well, now there are all opportunities to decide, well, where are we going to go? And what do we want to choose if we're going to a restaurant? What do we want on the menu? If I'm going to a bar, what do I want to order to drink? And there are all these opportunities to make choices. And choice making for most of us is a really positive thing.
It's kind of like a yin and yang, a balance act, really. You know, daytime, nighttime, straight lace, you know, let loose. You know, no choice during the day, but then at night I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And is that something that's ingrained in us? Like we feel.
Is that biological? You saying?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, certainly, all of us want to have a sense of agency, meaning that we can make decisions about what happens to us and make decisions that affect the world around us, right? But if we're in a job where there are a number of strictures that limit what we can choose and limit how we can make our own decisions, well, then the opportunity to get out of that and now have a chance to make decisions. And then we combine that with what Art was mentioning a few minutes ago about being with other people, and they're in the same frame of mind. Well, you can see how all of that leads to a really positive kind of vibe that comes about when you have people who, for the last 8 or 9 hours, whatever it's been, have been doing things that they're meeting their responsibilities and making sure they're on schedule and those kinds of things. And now suddenly all of us have sort of been freed from that. And now we have opportunities to make all kinds of choices and make them together. That's a pretty appealing thing. You know?
And then you get some contagion on top of that. So there's this idea of goal contagion, which is if you see people doing something, it makes you want to do the same thing.
Right.
And this is why there'll be nights where you're thinking, I don't know if I want to go out tonight. I'm tired. It's been a long week. But then you drag yourself out, and once you get out, you're happy you went out because everyone's dancing or singing or doing what they're doing. And what happens is you actually do get carried along by the energy of what's going on. You get carried along by what people are doing. You see people doing things that makes you want to do the same thing, which can be great most of the time. You know, if somebody's lining up a row of shots on the bar and that creates the contagion to join in that. Maybe well, not always.
We all have that
great
friend,
thing.
that friend that calls and goes, "All right, man, we're going out tonight."
Yeah.
And like,
Unless you
tired,
are that
I'm
friend.
tired. I don't know. I got to be up. Come on, you deserve this. You worked hard all week. You got to come on. We all have that friend, right?
I want to explore something y'all said earlier. It's a thing that's come up a couple times, and that is you were talking about day and night. During the day, your job, a metaphor for your job, whatever you're doing, your responsible time. You have these different restrictions. You don't have as much agency. And at night, that gives you your more agency to go choose and do things, right? So that's part of the yin and yang there. With that in mind, with that paradigm in mind, would you say maybe, is there any link that y'all have seen data-wise between the more restrictive your job, the more almost suffocating the job is, maybe the more you're willing to, the more you're wanting to go out? The idea of, you work hard, play hard. Is that truly a connection between that? Does that factor in?
There is. So there is some work on self-control, arguing that the more self-control you have to exert during the day, the less self-control you have left over by the time the night comes.
Is it like almost you have a limited pool of self-control in a day?
So that's been the argument, right? Is that self-control is a limited resource, and that if you deplete it during the day because you've had to put on a good face for the boss and do a bunch of things you didn't really want to do, that the nighttime comes and you're just done with that. And so now you're. It's not so much that it's not so much a catharsis, meaning I have to do this in order to feel better. It's more that all of these drives to do stuff that you might have been able to withhold earlier in the day, you're
Right.
just done withholding stuff.
Yeah. And I think another thing about that too is that when you're in a situation that's stressful, right? A lot of this has to do with how you respond to the circumstance
stress.
you are during the day. So it's not just how restricted you are, how limited you are in making choices. It's how you as an individual react to that. I mean, some people find that comforting. They like not to have to make decisions and how other people just to kind of direct them in what they should be doing. Other people find that very frustrating. And so it's not a matter only of what you're having to do, it's how you're responding to what you're having to do. And I think if you're in a situation where you feel like, man, I am being hemmed in here and it's driving me crazy, I think there's even more effort required, as Art's talking about, to kind of keep myself together in this
Right.
situation. And so when I'm done and I get to escape, well, I certainly am going to feel more of a need to kind of let everything out now that I have been holding in all day, you know?
Got it. So that friend that buys all the shots, we need to tell him to get a new job.
No, but there is
But
a
one
sense-
that keeps paying enough for him to keep buying. it.
right. Don't keep around.
Yeah,
You don't give 'em around.
exactly. Right.
But the way that we rationalize it, you know, when we, as simple as it sounds, as simple as you guys describe it, like, look, it's just really a need to be social that's ingrained in us.
Yeah.
That's, you know, it's a balance act, like we were saying earlier. But we still try to rationalize it with BS, really. Going, oh well, I work hard today, or there's a special event, but it's at the core of it. It's really that simple. But why is it that we need to really like think it through and convince ourselves really to really partake in this?
Well, we're wonderful storytellers, and and I mean that's part of the beauty of a human brain is we can make up all kinds of stuff. Actually, and a lot of it sounds pretty reasonable, except a lot of it, as you say, is not reasonable. It's just sort of some post hoc rationalization for what we're doing. But I think we have a need to make the world understandable. And a lot of the world is just random, and we don't like that. And so we look for a way to explain either a feeling that we have or a felt need that we have, so we can concoct wonderful stories that will allow us to say, well, that explains it. When actually that might not explain it at all. I mean, it's not that all those stories are bullshit, but I mean, some of them may be.
Right.
And we have a difficult time ourselves telling which of those are the accurate ones and which ones aren't.
And there's a cultural component to this too, right? So I mean, American culture is an interesting one in that there's a prescribed norm that we're supposed to be responsible, we're supposed to do the right thing, and so we then have to create an excuse for just going out
That
and
is
having
true.
a good time on a particularly if we're doing it at an off time. Like if you're going to go out on a Thursday, you need a reason, right? And that's not true of every culture, right? I mean, there's plenty of cultures where do your hard work during the day, but then go out and have a 4-hour dinner,
Yes.
and so when you're in a culture that requires that kind of excuse making, well, we've got this massive frontal lobe, and one of the things it's good at doing is creating excuses.
Yeah, just to give you an example, I grew up in France, and until I came here, I never heard someone say, I'm gonna get, pardon my French, sorry, I'm gonna get fucked up tonight. I've never heard anybody say that before, like as in I'm making this statement and I'm making it a mission, and if I fail at this mission, I feel horrible about myself.
Yeah.
And chances are, yeah, you're gonna get fucked up that night.
They had a
But-
small frontal lobe.
Yes, but in Europe, where I grew up, it's more of a, if we happen to let's get together, it's not that big a deal. It doesn't have to be a birthday or a bachelorette party. It doesn't have to be this big production. Who's driving who?
Yeah.
What time do we get there? No, it's just, hey, let's go eat. It's that simple. And then the dinner lasts 4 hours. But at no point someone said, oh yeah, I'm here because I want to get drunk, or it's really that basic of a reasoning. And it's a contract that I've noticed. Not everything, but people in this country like to do things big. and it always struck me, and I don't know why that is.
Is it like they oscillate between extremes? So
yeah,
it's like
everything's got to be huge and extreme, and you decide, I'm going to get fucked up tonight. I'm like, well, all right, go for it.
Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Here's the trophy. Here you go.
Well, I think some of that is attributable to having high aspirations for intensity. You know what I mean? You want something to be not just good, you want it to be great. And what that has to do with, I don't know, a movie you see, or a new album that comes out, or a new restaurant you try. There's an aspiration. Everything needs to be
The best.
high intensity.
Got to be winning.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges of that is that it creates an intention where somebody says, I got to get wasted. I mean, I can't just have a drink with somebody and have a conversation,
Right?
Because that's kind of like low bar.
That's boring.
Right.
Yeah,
That's boring.
and I think it's sort of a paradoxical thing, right? Because I think what happens, and I don't want to generalize about the French or Europeans in general.
go ahead.
But I think the idea of a more moderated pace of things, that things don't swing like, the day was horrible and I got to make tonight fantastic, and
Right.
kind of thing. Because most of the people I think who live pretty satisfying, rewarding lives, the amplitude of those swings isn't very big. You know what I mean? I mean, things are nice, and then things I was a little harder, but I mean, generally the trajectory's going up, but things generally are on a positive trajectory. But I think for people who are sort of unhappy in an intense way, they feel like I need to get happy at an equal level of intensity. So I'm going to put forth all this effort in many ways that don't actually end up making me happy, but
The next day you regret it.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I'm not even sure the fact that you may not remember much of that effort that you put into it, makes it hard to imagine that will be a lasting part of what you see as your positive experience, because
Right.
most of it is gone, right?
Except that tattoo.
You had to bring that up, didn't you? Yeah.
Is there a story there?
Yeah. Don't go there. Yeah.
No, but another side that I like to explore a little bit is the sexual tension aspect of going out. This is like when you think about going on a date, it's at night. You're trying to impress, the opposite sex, or it's, at night. And the whole ritual of getting ready. Okay, I'm gonna take a shower. I'm gonna wear my lucky pants or whatever girls put their makeup on.
You have lucky pants,
pants?
really?
Doesn't everybody have lucky pants?
I have lucky boxers.
Yeah. All right.
No, but it's this whole. It feels like it's like mating season every night, kind of deal, and I'm trying to draw a parallel between that and animals. How? Oh no, we are animals.
We are animals.
I'm not
we
psychology
are.
professor, folks. I'm just talking shit here. That's right. But my point is the part of why people choose to partake in that experience is also the attraction to the opposite sex or same sex, and how does that fit into how does that fit in this concept where we want to do this, we know what that takes, but to be part of that, we have to dress up and go through all this ritual or preparation.
Well, listen, I mean, a big part of human life is centered around relationships. And some of those relationships are romantic relationships, and if you're in one, you're trying to maintain it. And if you're not in one, you might be trying to get in one. And so there's an elaborate set of rituals. A lot of them are cultural, right? So we don't have prescribed things like bighorn sheep or something that are gonna run into each other. But culturally we know what it means to try to prepare to, so for people who are trying to meet somebody, we know what it means to try to prepare for that, and how you're supposed to be dressed. And we know, I mean, the field of evolutionary psychology spends a lot of time looking at the various cues that people might use to determine whether somebody else is attractive. So if you think, for example, about dancing, right? Mm-hmm. Dancing, why is that a thing? And why is that a thing when it relates to meeting potential romantic partners? Well, part of what you display in dancing is coordination, right? And coordination is
or not.
Or
for some of us.
Some level of coordination. Zero is also a level of coordination. And so you're displaying something that tells other people quickly something about you, right? So if you have a particular level of smoothness, right, mm-hmm. that's much more immediately obvious when you're looking at somebody on a dance floor than when you're trying to find out about them through a conversation. So a lot of these rituals are things that we do to provide information about ourselves. We're providing information about our taste, about our coordination, about how much money we're advertising that we have, mm-hmm. Because the types of clothing that you wear are signals of financial success and social class and other things, right? So we're projecting things about ourselves. And so a lot of what we're doing is spending time thinking, okay, what am I trying to say about myself? And I may not be doing that explicitly, right? I may not be standing in front of the mirror saying, no, I think this projects something that's a little too straight-laced.
Happens more than you think.
But certainly when you look at yourself in a mirror, or when you picked out those clothes in the first place, or when you found the lucky boxers, remember there's lucky boxers, not lucky briefs, right? So you were making a decision there, early on. And so
that is the most interesting observation you've made all day.
Maybe ever. But all of this is a communication process that is surrounding something that is a very important part of human experience.
But back to your point, Bob, we're great storytellers.
Yeah.
So all of that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Right.
And most time it doesn't mean anything at all.
Well, I think part of it too has to do with goal setting. As you were describing, I'm meeting somebody. So what's the goal? Well, if the goal is to have a nice evening and a pleasant conversation, that's a different kind of preparing than expecting to get laid. So it's a whole different attitude about what does this night experience mean, and what do I want it to mean? And I think a lot of times, the reason that people invest so heavily in preparations and those kinds of things is they have very specific goals about what they want to have happen. And, in most instances when we're meeting new people, there's a lot we can't predict about what's going to happen. Right. And if your definition of a successful evening is pretty narrow, well, then you've increased the likelihood you're going to be unhappy.
Agreed.
Than if you have a wider range of options that think, well, I could be happy if any one of these things happen, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, that's an important thing, especially when you think about younger people who are still figuring out who they are and what kind of relationships they want to build with other people and those kinds of things. I think often, media, whoever the hell they are, communicate things about what you should expect that are often not necessarily healthy in the long term.
Agreed.
About what an experience is going to be like, what a relationship is going to be like, what time together is going to be like. And I think for young people who don't have a lot of experiences yet, it's understandable that they might misperceive what it means to go out in the evening and have a good time, right? Because they might have goals that require such a narrow bandwidth that, man, you got to work really hard to make that happen. And the likelihood is it's actually not going to happen. So you sort of set yourself up to be miserable a lot, which I think, unfortunately, many people then use, whatever mind-altering substances is their preference to sort of make that okay. When in fact, opening up what the options are for what counts as a successful evening does the same thing.
It also gives, if you define success too narrowly, you then don't enjoy most of the evening.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, if your whole point of going out to dinner or going out for drinks and dinner and then music is for whatever's going to happen after that,
Yep.
then you haven't had as much fun with the dinner, the drinks, and the music, right? Which turns out to be a lovely evening.
Right.
Yeah.
To
Not
start
after
with.
parties, what counts?
Yeah.
You know, so that's, you know, I think a lot of times we're, you know, in life in general, and I think in nightlife as well, we're looking on to the next thing, right? So you don't enjoy the opening act
That is
because
true.
you're waiting for the main act to come on, but the opening act might be great.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so you know, find the stuff to enjoy all along the way.
Let me, a couple of things I want to jump in here. 2 points. One, from earlier conversation about dancing, a little colloquialism here. I heard it's a vertical expression of horizontal desire. Quote on that one. Two, I think you're very much right in defining your goals for the night in order to better set the expectation of like success or failure. And I think some of that is on people, but I think there's a lot of societal peer pressure on that.
Sure.
When I go out, people ask me, "What did you do last night? Did you take anybody home? Did you get laid? Oh, you didn't. Oh, you're lame." And no, I still had a good time. But that's just there's a ascribed expectation, I feel, in society that's defining what a successful night is, and
Yeah.
you really have to fight that as an individual in order to be happy with what you do when you go out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of the social conventions, you know, as Art was saying, culture has a lot to do with this, right? And so depending on where you are and what venue you're in, I mean, there are some places where generally people who would choose to be in that environment probably have a different expectation in general than people who are going to a different kind of environment, whether it has to do with, you know, how much they're going to consume in the way of alcohol, to what the relationship is going to be like with the people they're out with. I mean, all those kinds of things I mean, we are, and we should probably get into this at some point, we are environmentally controlled, right? I mean, the circumstances in which we find ourselves have a greater implicit influence on what we end up doing and saying than many of us would like to think. You know, we think we are who we are, and we are who we are irrespective of the environment we're in. Well, I mean, you just think about through any day that you exist, and you think you behave differently depending on what the environment is like and who the people are who are in that environment.
Right.
So I think a lot of the thing about, you know, the choice making thing and the goal setting can be aided and sort of helped along by choosing, well, what kind of environments do I want to put myself in that are going to lead to the kinds of things that I'd like to have for myself in the way of social interactions and, you know, whatever pleasurable activities they happen to be.
Pro tip.
No, and I think you add, you know, different types of environment, like a concert versus just a bar, where a bar is more free form, like you're just in there, you walk in, do whatever you want. But a concert is a more restrictive type of environment where we're all facing the same direction, we're all listening to the same music, we're all, you know, enjoying ourselves. And how does that, in terms of making the, oh shit, I just lost my thought. No, that happens.
Well,
I know what happens.
when it
Go ahead. I'll get back to that in a second.
We'll edit
Sure.
that out in post.
Byron, we'll cut this out.
So I'll jump in there and I'll tag along with that when it comes to content. So I think there's different types of, I think you're describing it, different types of environment elicit different types of social situations. And maybe y'all can talk a little bit to, one of the things we talk a lot on this show about is concerts and nightlife. Right? Concerts and music is a big part of our show because it's a big part of Austin and a big part of our environment here.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between going to a concert, going to dinner, and what have you. Can y'all speak a little bit to the differences maybe that someone experiences at a show in live music, whereas, as Back was explaining, you're together
Horribly.
in a group all facing the same way, kind of in that shared experience doing the same thing, versus at a bar where it's a lot more free-flowing and you're all individually doing different things at that same environment.
Thank you for asking my question.
Well
back
done. You guys are
translator.
great.
He's
It's a
trying to
great
say for me, that's
team
why
here.
I'm on the show. I just ramble when he comes up with the question.
So one of the things we know from some research is that when people engage in an activity where they act in synchrony with other people, they actually feel closer to those people in that moment. And this could be true if you're marching with people, but it's also true going to a concert. Like if you're at a big concert and everyone's clapping in time with the music, you actually end up feeling closer with all of the people in the audience. Even though you're all facing the same direction, you're not looking at each other, but it's the shared activity. And that's one of the things that music does. I mean, music creates a certain amount of synchrony because there's a common beat.
Right.
That everyone is sharing, and so it actually creates a communal experience, which a regular bar scene doesn't do. Right? There's music playing in the background, but basically that serves as noise that requires everyone else to shout over it in order to have that conversation.
Tell me about it.
And so what you have in a bar is a whole bunch of groups having independent interactions, and so you don't feel close to everybody else in the bar. That amount of noise might create some energy, some arousal, but it doesn't make you feel close to anybody. But being in a concert really does create this bonding experience that can be really wonderful, and is one of the reasons why live music is so much different than listening to recorded music in your own home.
Yeah, and this thing about synchrony and what music provides in that is really a very primitive part of who we are. There's some interesting research that's been done at McMaster University in Canada, where infants who are in a little child carrier, right? If an individual moves in synchrony with somebody else, right, that child is likely to see that other adult more positively than if the other adult is bouncing up and down at a different speed. Now, that's a really primitive thing to think that infants that have no sense of what the hell's going on, but they do know you and I are moving together, so that must mean you and I have some relationship that is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Is there such thing as go out too much or too little?
Asking for a friend.
I've done my time, I think.
One of the things that we've talked about a lot on our show is the importance of sleep. And so
Secret to success.
It turns out that sleep matters. And there's a simple test that everyone can do. Find a book and sit down and try and read it at 2:30 in the afternoon. Okay? If you fall asleep within 5 minutes of starting to read at 2:30 in the afternoon, you're not getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
And it's okay to stay up every once in a while really late, to do something. But I think if you get to the point where you're operating on 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night because you're going out every night and then trying to get up to go to work, then you're really doing your brain a disservice. You're going to be not only are you not going to be as sharp mentally, you're going to actually be emotionally riding a little bit more of a roller coaster, and you're not going to engage in social interactions that are as pleasant. So I think one of the things one of the signs that you might be going out too much is if you're really chronically underslept.
Yeah, and sleep has impacts so many aspects of who we are, how we think, how we respond to the things that we encounter during the day. And I think it's understandable that many people, again, culturally in the United States, being driven, working hard, playing hard, that kind of thing, it just sounds so great, except our bodies and our minds weren't built to do that, right? I mean, they were built. I mean, really, if you think about it, why would evolution select for a trait where you're unconscious 1/3 of every day, right? I mean, really, and so there has to be a reason for that. That's really important. But now we have lots of ways to keep ourselves awake longer. We have artificial light, we have caffeine, we have Red Bull. We have all kinds of things to do to keep ourselves awake long after our bodies have told us, you should really close your eyes and go to sleep right now. And I think one of the reasons that this has such important consequences for people is what it has to do with a sense of well-being, right? I mean, mental health is dependent upon sleep. And if you think about almost every mental health disorder, one of the contributors to that is not sleeping well. And I think, a lot of times we think, because it seems this way, well, if I stay up, really late on the weekends and then I sleep in late and I'll kind of make up for all that. Actually,
It's not a thing.
Yeah,
Doesn't
that
work.
is not a thing. You know, it's just not a. It's not a thing.
So I can catch
Yeah.
up on Sunday.
And I know we sound like a couple of old fogies here saying,
Which,
"Get
by
to
the
bed.
way, we are.
Get to bed, kids." But I think when most of us have a goal that we want to get the most out of all the experiences that we have, all the opportunities we have, make the most of those. Those always get better when we're rested.
Yeah.
They always get better when we're slept.
Now that said, right, going out one night on the weekend till 2 a.m.
Yeah.
that's great. Have a good time. It's just, but the issue is if this now becomes, well, we started off, it was going to be Thursday to Sunday, but you know what? Wednesday's almost Thursday, so
Hump day, let's go.
right, yeah. So
Tuesday, let's go.
so now if it's 5-6 days a week that you're going out and staying out late, well, now you're going to start suffering from that, and that's
Right.
really the place where you want to take a step back and really rethink things before you get sick, really.
And you throw in age in play here, where I realized just last weekend that clubs are just not for me anymore. Lounges are better.
Yeah,
This loud and being around a bunch of 20-year-olds, like, okay, no, that's not my thing anymore. And when you add the more, as you get older, the responsibilities,
Sure.
and you try to make the right choices, even though you chose to be part of this, and you're telling yourself, yeah, I deserve to be out there and having a good time. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, yeah, but tomorrow I have this presentation, I got this and that. So time is not, and age does not help in that.
No, it doesn't, and it's funny. So I in my spare time, I play in a band, and one of the things, our band's a bunch of old guys, and so we actually like the early show. Like all that show that the clubs have all this difficulty booking because every band wants to be playing at 2
It's a
in the
headline,
morning,
right, yeah.
right? We're no, give us the early, the earlier the better. We've been playing at 6:30 in the afternoon. We're like, bring it on. Our people will come out to a 6:30 show.
They got stuff to do.
That's right. They're the band of the early bird special.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly.
I want to attack the same topic, but I want to sidestep it and hit it from a different angle, right? So we talked about sleep and how remember the core question was, is going out too much or too little, is that a thing? Is that something to be concerned about? I want to attack it from the angle of, is there such a thing as being too much an extrovert? Going out there and getting too much of that social experience, too much of that synchronicity, where maybe you lose some of the individual self and id. Is that a thing that can happen? Is there any studies on that, anything that I've heard of?
Well, if you think about the concept of extroversion, right? So there's what are called the big five personality characteristics, and one of those big five is extroversion, and its opposite introversion, and there are big individual differences in that. And it turns out with most personality characteristics, most of us sit in the middle. Most of us have a little bit of introversion, a little bit of extroversion, and then there are some people who are extreme on both ends. And one of the things that people should do is to try to live in a way that is relatively true to what they're motivated to do, and that's where those personality characteristics come in. Now, if you're the sort of person who is really extroverted, so you want to be in the middle of it all the time, you want to be the focus of attention, you want to be in those social situations, you're going out a lot, or at least putting yourself into a lot of situations where there are a lot of people, that's going to be a great thing for you. And likewise, if you're very much on the introverted side and really what you want is small conversations with a small group of friends, well, that's where you ought to be living. The thing to remember is most of us do fall in the middle. Most of us have both of those pieces. And so what you'll find if you're like most people and you're sitting in the middle, you'll go out a couple of times and then you'll kind of wake up the next day and you'll have friends who might be on that more extroverted side say, come on out again. And you might be rebelling against that. Listen to that voice, right? Give yourself a chance to have a quieter night hanging out in a lower key environment, because you may actually be motivated in both directions at different times. And so don't really, I think it's not good to force yourself in either direction. I mean, if you absolutely hate crowds and you've tried it, right? It's not that you've never tried it. You really that's not your environment. you don't have to prove anything to anybody. You can find there are plenty of wonderful things to do on an evening that don't involve 1,000 of your closest friends and thumping bass.
and I think part of that gets back to what we were talking about earlier about being at an age where you're trying to establish who you are and what you're going to be like, right? And I think there, we all recognize there's a tremendous amount of social pressure if we have a group of friends to be like the group, even if we're not. And I think probably a good question to ask is how often in a week do you say to yourself, I'm here, I really don't want to be here? Because if that answer is a lot, although there are a lot of times I find myself in a place saying, I don't want to be here. Well, then it's time to rethink how you're setting up those expectations and setting up the environments for yourself.
And which friends you listen to.
Yeah, because I think, when if someone is somewhat more reserved and would rather not be out all the time, and they have friends who are more so, and they want them to come out, the friends are saying that with the best of intentions, because everything about what they're thinking is, I always have a good time when you do this, so you'll have a good time. Well, actually, I'm so not you, right? I mean, you have a way of experiencing other people, interacting with other people. I'm different from that. And I think sometimes having those conversations with friends so everybody understands where everybody feels comfortable, where you prefer to be and where you don't prefer to be, is a way to kind of increase happiness, really, because now you don't feel like you're being pressured to do things that you might not otherwise want to do.
So it's almost know where you fall in the bell curve of this, or as the kids say, stay in your lane.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, you got the people who just always want to roll solo.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, look, I don't need to have a bunch of people, pressure me on doing things that I'm good on my own.
Yeah.
So how does that fit?
Well, again, right? I mean, that's we each have different ways of interacting, right? And we have different types of what's called a self-construal. Right? So some people define themselves independently of everyone else. And some people define themselves interdependently from everyone else. Some people see themselves as the ringleader, as the I am part of who I am is my connection to my social group. And other people, their definition of self is really about my own personal characteristics. And I think that to the extent that you tend to define yourself more independently, then you don't necessarily feel like you need the group in order to feel like yourself. Whereas when you define yourself interdependently, then almost by definition, you actually need that group around even to feel like yourself. Yeah. And so, and where this can cause tension is where you have some people in your social group who are more interdependent and some who are more independent, where the interdependent people are constantly grabbing and saying, I need you in order for me to have a good evening. And you're saying, wait a second, I'm not sure I need anyone to have a good evening.
Right.
So maybe in that situation you have to find a way to, if you're the more independent sort, you have to find a way to craft a certain amount of time that is not going to be dependent on what everybody else is trying to do.
Yeah.
What I find interesting, when I go out, and I think we all do this, is people watch.
Yeah.
I mean, it is National Geographic. It's really how I'll describe it.
You've been on both ends of that show.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and it's interesting how you take a group of, say, 5 people, and each person takes on a specific role in that group. Maybe it's the role that they take on in the daytime at work. Like you'll be able to pick out who has the manager job, because that's the person like, all right, we're going to leave, we're going to go to this place and then that place and that place. And then you have the office goofball who's always like, oh, let's take another round of shots or whatever. Yeah. So I think that the dynamics in the group are very revealing into the true character, of the people in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the question.
Yes.
Yeah. We agree. No, I mean, and that's the thing about personality is that your personality, the particular behaviors you're going to engage in a situation are dependent in part on the environment, but your own personality is still going to shine through quite a bit. So, for example, the really conscientious person in the group is the one who's making sure that, the check is taken care of and that everybody contributed their share. And, and so you've got, the agreeable person is the one who's making sure that the two people in the corner were sniping at each other. Like, hey, let's calm down. Let's just have a good time, So you really are going to get those personality characteristics are going to influence the group dynamic.
I want to. So, as we started this whole conversation about saying that we're social creatures and we kind of have a need to be around people, and in the world today, where you don't need to go to movie theater to watch a movie anymore. You can just get Netflix. Like we've gotten to a
Apparently,
point
you can watch this podcast on Facebook.
You can exactly. So, is that do you see that as a detrimental trend today, in a sense that basically we have to go out to find entertainment, to go to shows, to be around people, to go to a bar, to meet people, and now it's like, look, I can just do it on my phone. I can. At some point, they come up with VR goggles you can put on, and then here you're at the show. You never had
whole nother
to leave
conversation.
I'm not going to
good one now.
But long term, is that detrimental? Even though we have all this technology that's supposed to connect us, and now we're just everything's delivered, at home or on a piece of technology.
Well, we've done a number of shows about communicating with other people in some way other than face-to-face, right? I mean, whether it's the way we curate our Facebook page or when we interact through Twitter or some chat message or something like that, that's a different kind of communication, right? I mean, when you're in the presence of another human being, what you have the advantage of is you see them responding to you in the moment. And I think, the reason a lot of communication online is coarser than I think most of us would like it to be is in large part because people, their filters are down because they're not getting any responses to what they're doing. If I'm banging out something on my keyboard and hitting submit or send, I don't see anybody receiving that and responding to it. And if you and I are having a conversation, I can see your face and I can see what you're looking at and when you're smiling and when you look unhappy and those kinds of things. So that changes the nature of the interaction. What I think is potentially problematic about that is when that kind of interaction with other human beings is your primary and maybe even your only kind of interaction, because you don't really have a sense of, first of all, how you're affecting other people through your communication, whatever it is. And also, you really don't have a sense of really what other people say, because when we type something or write something or post a photo, that's a different thing than seeing someone express something in person, right? I mean, when we're having a conversation with somebody, there's a lot of things that are being communicated other than the words, right? I mean, there are lots of
body
stuff,
expressions.
that's going back and forth that we miss when we're just communicating in some electronic version that doesn't have live interaction.
I always like to say there's no backspace in real life.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But the other thing that happens is there's real value in shared experiences, right? And so when everyone's having an individual experience, and they're sharing it over this very narrow bandwidth of communication, that's just not the same as being there, right? I mean, so being at a football game and watching the play unfold and watching the entire crowd respond to that, going to a concert and seeing a particularly magical musical moment, right? Those experiences create a shared experience among a number of people, whether it's a large-scale experience like a big concert or a sporting event, or even if it's just your group of friends getting together. The other thing is these immersive experiences are much more memorable. Right. I mean, if you think about it, you probably, on a typical day may answer 20, 30, 50, 70 emails, none of which you remember at the end of the day, thankfully, right? But partly you don't remember them because they're not a deeply immersive experience. But if you've seen a great concert in your life, chances are you can tell the entire story about that concert and remember particular songs and where you were sitting in the arena and what it felt like when the encore came on and all of these other things. that immersion creates this memory that you then get to share with the other participants that brings you all closer together. So it's extraordinarily important to overcome the inertia of sitting on the couch with your phone and just typing away to people, and actually get together, go out and do stuff.
And I think I would add to that too. There are a lot of times when people are physically together but not together,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that certainly diminishes the potential positive effect of being together with other people, because you got stuff happening on your phone and they got something happening on their phone, and it's not really, we're not having a conversation. And I think really when you think about it, what happens in shared experiences goes beyond just the moments of the experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that after the concert, we're talking about the concert.
Right.
You know, we're talking to other people about the concert. And now the experience reaches far beyond just us and this thing that happened that we were a part of, right? Now it becomes something that provides a bridge to have conversations with Art and me, because we were both there, and now other people who weren't there, I can now have something to convey to them. And so it creates a whole different opportunity for human interaction that wouldn't happen if we were just sort of in our own world, you know, reading a book at home and staying alone.
But you know, it's kind of a paradox, because we want to be social and yet we're not. The saddest thing I've ever seen was a bachelorette party with 15 girls sitting around the couch at a bar, all on their phone.
Yeah.
Saddest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Do you have any question? Yeah.
I say we take questions from the crowd.
We got a beautiful crowd here today. Thanks so much for coming through. We have a wireless mic. If anybody got any questions to ask Bob and Art, feel free.
Yeah. If
You want to come and sit here, or you want
welcome to come. You don't have.
You don't have to. You don't have to. No pressure. No pressure. Go for it. Into the mic.
What? Oh yeah. So, right, what you were just discussing, right? Like about, like for instance, Facebook, or I mean, there are virtual experiences that are shared, right? Like video games or so, in which a lot of people actually have this experience and again, you know, like relate this way, or actually, I mean, which to me actually poses a question to the conclusions you were coming up with, but then also just like I mean, if it so happens that everybody is actually talking more through their phones, wouldn't the necessity of still expressing emotions come up as emojis or GIFs or something else, you know, that manifests these emotions anyway? Yeah.
So it's a couple of things to say. First of all, absolutely, we always use technologies to try to create social experiences, because we are social creatures. So we try to duplicate that as much as possible. And so there certainly are, you know, some attempts to do that are better than others. And there are times where there are actually things like shared video games that might actually be easier to do with technology than without. So this isn't to say all technology is bad all the time.
Yeah.
But I do think that we have to recognize that when the further away we move from the ideal form of communication, which is a small group of people face to face in real time who speak the same language, the further away we get from that, the harder it is to communicate. Now, we desperately try to get all of the stuff that we're missing back into the conversation. So because text is really hard for expressing emotion, we have emoticons and then emojis, and those are okay, but they're still not quite the same, right? Because you have to put the emoji somewhere. It usually goes at the end. But the arched eyebrow actually came at a particular word when you spoke it in your head, and then you had to add that later, and now you're hoping that they're going to fill that in the right place. But this is why there are still times where you miscommunicate, even with really good friends, where you meant something to be completely ironic, and they're like, "That was just mean," and you're like, "No, I was just joking," right? And now you've totally derailed the conversation, because despite your best efforts, the tone of voice that you would have gotten completely correct if you'd been with the person is missing. So it's a lot more work, right? It's not that you can't do it, and it's not that you can't find these repairs. It's just you got to do a lot of extra work to overcome what happens when you're not together in the same place.
I think one of the most interesting ways to think about this and how much the presence of another human being actually influences what an interaction is like, is imagining the difference between typing to someone who shares your language and being in the presence of someone who speaks an entirely different language that you don't understand. And you think about how much you can convey if you were to sit down and have a meal together. You couldn't speak each other's languages, but there's stuff on the table, there's food coming. How much communication there would be without a word, right? And I would argue that communication would be much richer than two people typing in separate rooms, right? Even though the words would be the same, because as Art's saying, you may have, you know, an emoji that has an arched eyebrow, but to pair it with the word or to pair it with what just happened, the timing of all of that is crucial to understanding another human being. And when you remove things in time, well, now I've got to do a lot of translating in my head that I don't have to do if you and I are sitting in the same room at the same time.
And you're doing this at a concert that's taken away from actually enjoying the show.
Yeah.
Just to bring it back. But I want to bring up this concept of FOMO. You know, we were talking about earlier how we're always looking for the next best thing.
Yeah.
Right.
I think before you go further, just, you know, for the people that may not know what FOMO stands for as an acronym.
The fear of missing out. Sorry. So
they would have missed out if you didn't say that.
And then FOMO about FOMO.
I was afraid.
So meta.
I was afraid.
It's very meta. Yeah.
So this idea that, okay, I'm out with my friends, and whatever environment I'm in right now is not good enough.
Yeah.
And I'm going to spend more time looking for the next thing than enjoying this moment right now.
Yeah.
Has there been research on FOMO? I'm guessing. What do you mean? Hey. You said. I mean,
Asking for a friend.
Yes. Because right now I could be at this other thing.
Everyone in this room is thinking that.
But is it a new phenomenon or something that existed?
It's not new.
It's not new. No. This is why Buddhism exists. I mean, if you think about it, right? I mean, Buddhist philosophy is all about, you know, let's be in the moment, right? And so if you think about, you know, one of the things that the human mind has is a remarkable capacity for time travel. And so often we're not in the moment. We're in a previous moment or worried about a future moment, but we're not in this moment. So in some sense, you know, I mean, a number of Buddhism is only one. A number of religions have actually and philosophies have tried to say, you know what, try to enjoy where you are right now, because it's very easy to get lost either in the future or the past. Right, there are for every person who's thinking I could be doing something better right now, so maybe I should be looking towards that. There's also somebody worrying about the comment that they made to somebody that might have been misinterpreted, where they ruin their evening because they think they might have insulted somebody. Right? I mean, so one of the things all of us have to learn is actually let's be here now. Right? Let's actually enjoy this moment for what it is, and then enjoy the next moment later.
You know, Art would be disappointed if I didn't bring up.
It's true.
It's right. How privileged we all are who are in this room and who live in this town,
or on Facebook watching.
Or yeah, that's right. I mean, this is a remarkably good life that all of us enjoy.
Right.
And it seems sad to me to screw that up. But one of the ways I think we inadvertently do that is imagine things that could be better. And whether it's FOMO or some other, I mean, it could be, you know, I have this job now, but, you know, I'm just kind of, this is a holding pattern because I'm going to get a better job. And, you know, Art and I have many students at the university who, to me, are way less happy than I think they should be. With the idea in mind, well, I'm going to suffer now, and then I'll graduate, and then life will start, and it'll be lovely. Well, actually, life started a long time ago, and this is it. You know, and
You're 2 decades into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, what were you doing all this time?
Exactly right. And I think, you know, that there's an old saw that, you know, the perfect is the enemy of the good.
Right.
I mean, most of us are not choosing between something really great and something really awful. We're choosing among several great things and some pretty good things. And to make any of those less than positive because we're not sure if it's the very best thing is a sad mistake.
Even a mediocre piece of candy is still a pretty good piece of candy.
Yeah.
Still candy.
It's still candy.
Exactly
Baby.
right.
Exactly right.
And you think about it for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So you're living in the past. All right, we're gonna wrap things up. Any other question in the audience?
Of anything we've talked about? Nope.
We'll bring up something new. No.
Well, we're right at an hour. So
All
it's
right,
perfect.
Awesome.
we're gonna wrap things up. Art, Bob, thank you so much for doing
It's
this.
been our pleasure.
Can you
Thanks for
plug
having
your
me.
podcast? Go ahead and.
Two Guys on Your Head. You get it wherever podcasts are. iTunes, Stitcher,
Yeah,
all those
I
places.
do all those good. And for those of you who like your podcasts in written form, we did a book a couple of years ago called Brain Briefs that is answers to 40 random questions you never knew you had about psychology, ranging from the really important, like how do we make ourselves happy, to the perhaps less important, like why are kitten videos so awesome. It's available wherever books are sold.
Wherever books are sold. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Miko. Thank you, audience. You've been fabulous. Really appreciate it. Thank you for coming. Shout out to Native. Follow the FeedBak on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, FeedBak BAK. And we'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Goodbye, world.